German Shepherd. Was crying at the edge of a bridge. What baby did. Next left. Everyone in tears. What you're about to witness will shake you to your core. A story so powerful that even the toughest hearts couldn't hold back their tears. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The morning fog hung thick over Riverside Bridge like a heavy blanket that refused to lift. Cars moved slowly through the mist, their headlights cutting weak paths through the gray morning air. Sarah Mitchell pulled her old Honda to the side of the road, her windshield wipers fighting against the moisture that kept gathering on the glass. She was already running 15 minutes late for her shift at the hospital, and her 5-year-old son, Tommy, was going to be late for kindergarten again. But something on the bridge had caught her eye, something that made her foot hit the brake before her mind could even process what she was seeing. There, right at the edge of the pedestrian walkway, sat a large German Shepherd. The dog wasn't moving, wasn't barking, wasn't doing anything that dogs normally do. It was just sitting there, perfectly still, staring down at the dark water below. But that wasn't what made Sarah's heart skip a beat. The dog was crying. Real tears were rolling down its furry face, dropping onto the concrete below like tiny raindrops that had nothing to do with the morning mist. "Mommy, why did we stop?" Tommy asked from his booster seat in the back, his small voice cutting through Sarah's shocked silence. The boy was clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur, the one he never went anywhere without, and his bright blue eyes were curious as they tried to see what his mother was looking at. Sarah didn't answer right away. She couldn't. In all her years as a nurse, she'd seen plenty of emotional moments, but she had never seen anything quite like this. The German Shepherd was beautiful, clearly well cared for with a shiny coat that suggested regular grooming and good nutrition. A red collar circled its neck, and even from inside the car, Sarah could see a tag dangling from it. This wasn't some stray or abandoned animal. This was somebody's pet, somebody's family member, and it was sitting at the edge of a bridge crying like its heart was broken. "There's a dog, sweetie," Sarah finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "It looks like it needs help." Tommy immediately perked up, pressing his face against the window to get a better look. The moment his eyes landed on the German Shepherd, something changed in his expression. The usual excitement he showed when seeing any animal was replaced by something deeper, something that looked far too mature for a 5-year-old's face. "He's so sad, Mommy," Tommy said, and his voice had taken on that same strange quality it sometimes did when he seemed to know things he shouldn't know. "We have to help him." Sarah glanced at her watch. She was already late, and her supervisor had warned her just last week about her attendance. But looking at that dog, at those tears that couldn't possibly be real but somehow were, she knew she couldn't just drive away. She pulled the car into the small parking area near the bridge and turned off the engine. "We'll just check on him quickly, okay?" she said to Tommy, already unbuckling her seatbelt. "But you stay close to me. We don't know this dog." Tommy nodded solemnly, already working on his own seatbelt with the determination that only a 5-year-old on a mission could muster. Sarah helped him out of the car, taking his small hand firmly in hers as they approached the bridge. The fog seemed even thicker once they were out in it, wrapping around them like cold, damp fingers that made Sarah shiver despite her warm jacket. As they got closer to the German Shepherd, Sarah could see more details. The dog was male, probably around 4 or 5 years old based on his build, and the lack of gray around his muzzle. His ears were perked forward, alert despite his obvious distress, and his tail lay flat against the ground. But it was his eyes that made Sarah's breath catch. They were the deepest brown she had ever seen, and they held an intelligence that seemed almost human. Those eyes were fixed on the water below, watching it with an intensity that made Sarah's skin prickle with unease. "Hey there, boy," Sarah said softly, stopping about 5 feet away from the dog. She had learned from experience that approaching strange dogs too quickly was never a good idea, especially ones that might be distressed or injured. "Are you okay?" The German Shepherd's ear twitched at the sound of her voice, but he didn't turn to look at her. Another tear rolled down his face, and Sarah felt her heart clench. She had heard that dogs could produce tears when their eyes were irritated, but this was different. These weren't the tears of physical discomfort. These were tears of grief, of loss, of something so profound that even an animal couldn't contain the emotion. Tommy pulled his hand free from Sarah's grip before she could stop him. "Tommy, no!" she called out, reaching for him, But the boy was already moving toward the dog with a confidence that made no sense. He should have been afraid. Any normal 5-year-old would have been afraid of a large, unknown dog that was clearly upset. But Tommy walked right up to the German Shepherd and sat down beside him, crossing his little legs and placing his dinosaur carefully in his lap. Sarah held her breath, ready to grab her son at the first sign of aggression from the dog. But what happened next made her freeze in place. The German Shepherd slowly turned his head to look at Tommy, and the moment their eyes met, something passed between them. It was like watching two old friends reunite after years apart, a recognition that went deeper than anything Sarah could explain. Tommy reached out his small hand and placed it gently on the dog's head, right between his ears. The German Shepherd closed his eyes and leaned into the touch, a soft whine escaping from deep in his throat. More tears fell, but now the dog's tail gave a single, weak thump against the concrete. "His name is Max," Tommy said quietly, his voice carrying that strange certainty again. "He's waiting for someone." Sarah moved closer, her nurse's training overriding her maternal panic now that the dog seemed calm. "How do you know his name, baby?" she asked, kneeling down beside them and finally able to read the tag on the dog's collar. Her eyes widened. The tag was worn and scratched, but she could just make out the letters M-A-X engraved on one side. Tommy shrugged, his hand still gently stroking Max's fur. "He told me," he said simply, as if dogs talking to him was the most normal thing in the world. Before Sarah could process this, she heard footsteps approaching through the fog. Several other pedestrians had noticed them and were gathering, their faces showing a mixture of concern and curiosity. An elderly man with a walking stick stopped a few feet away, breathing heavily from his morning walk. "That dog's been there since before dawn," the old man said, shaking his head. "I passed by on my early walk around 5:30, and he was already there, just sitting and staring at the water. Gave me the chills, I tell you." A woman in running gear jogged in place as she added, "I tried to approach him earlier, but he growled at me. Not aggressive-like, more like he was warning me to stay away. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen. More people were stopping now, creating a small crowd on the bridge. Sarah could hear murmurs of conversation, people pulling out their phones to take pictures or videos. She felt protective of both Tommy and Max, not liking the attention, but understanding why people were fascinated. It wasn't every day you saw a dog crying real tears on a bridge. "Has anyone called animal control?" someone asked from the back of the growing crowd. "No need for that," a firm voice cut through the chatter. Sarah looked up to see a police officer approaching, his uniform crisp despite the damp morning. His badge read, Officer Jake Harrison, and he looked to be in his early 30s with kind eyes that surveyed the scene with professional interest. "Let's see what's going on here first." Officer Jake moved closer, his hand instinctively resting on his utility belt, though not near his weapon. He was clearly experienced with animals, approaching slowly and making himself appear non-threatening. But the moment he got within 3 feet of Max, the dog's demeanor changed completely. A low growl rumbled from his chest, his lips pulling back just enough to show the tips of his white teeth. It wasn't an aggressive display exactly, more like a clear warning that the officer should keep his distance. "Easy, boy," Officer Jake said, stopping immediately and holding his hands up in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not going to hurt you." But Max's growl continued, his body tensing as he shifted slightly to put himself between the officer and Tommy. Sarah's heart raced as she realized what was happening. The dog wasn't protecting himself. He was protecting her son. But why? They had never met before this morning. "It's okay, Max," Tommy said softly, his small hand never leaving the dog's head. "He's a good person. But you don't want him here, do you? You only want me." The growling stopped immediately. Max turned to look at Tommy again, and this time, Sarah could swear she saw the dog nod. It was subtle, just a small dip of his head, but it was there. Officer Jake saw it too, based on the way his eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Well, I'll be," the officer muttered, taking a step back. "Kid, you some kind of dog whisperer or something?" Tommy looked up at the officer with those serious blue eyes. "Max is special," he said. "He's looking for someone in the water." A chill ran through the crowd that had nothing to do with the morning fog. Several people moved closer to the bridge's railing, peering down at the dark river below. The water was high from recent rains, moving fast and murky. If someone had fallen in, if someone was down there... "Tommy," Sarah said carefully, not wanting to encourage what might be her son's imagination, but unable to ignore the possibility that something serious was happening. "What do you mean someone in the water? Who is Max looking for?" Tommy closed his eyes, his hand still on Max's head. The dog had gone very still, as if he too was waiting for Tommy to speak. When the boy opened his eyes again, they were filled with tears that matched Max's. "A little girl," Tommy whispered. "She has a yellow raincoat. She's scared. She's so scared." Officer Jake's radio crackled to life before anyone could respond to Tommy's words. The dispatcher's voice was urgent, cutting through the static with professional clarity. "All units be advised. We have a missing child report just filed. 6-year-old Emma Chen, last seen yesterday evening at River Park, wearing a yellow raincoat and pink boots. Parents say their German Shepherd search dog escaped their yard early this morning and hasn't been found." The blood drained from Sarah's face as she looked at Max, then at the tag on his collar. She turned it over with trembling fingers, and there on the back, barely visible through scratches and wear, was an address. She recognized the street name. It was in the wealthy section of town, about 3 miles from the bridge, where the Chen family lived. She knew of them vaguely, had seen their names in the local paper for their charity work. "Officer," Sarah said, her voice shaking, "I think this is their dog. I think this is the Chen family's search dog." Officer Jake was already on his radio, calling in their location and requesting immediate backup. The crowd around them had grown silent, the gravity of the situation sinking in. A missing child, a search dog crying on a bridge, and somehow, impossibly, Sarah's 5-year-old son seemed to be the only one who could communicate with the distraught animal. "Max is trained to find people," Tommy said suddenly, his voice stronger now. "He tracked Emma here, but something happened. She's not in the water anymore, but she was. She went somewhere the water took her, and Max can't reach her." "How can you possibly know that?" Officer Jake asked, but there was no skepticism in his voice now, only urgency. Tommy looked up at him with those 2 wise eyes. "Because Max is showing me. In my head, like pictures but not with my eyes. He's been trying to tell people all morning, but nobody could understand him. Nobody until me." Sarah wanted to say something, wanted to rationalize what her son was saying, but she couldn't. She had noticed things about Tommy over the past year, little things that she had dismissed or explained away. The way he always knew when their neighbor's cat was sick before anyone else noticed. The way he had insisted they take a different route home from school one day, only to find out later that there had been an accident on their usual road. The way animals always seemed drawn to him, calm around him, as if they recognized something in him that humans couldn't see. "Tommy," Officer Jake said, kneeling down to the boy's level. "This is very important. Can Max show you where Emma is now?" Tommy closed his eyes again, his face scrunching up in concentration. Max whined softly, pressing closer to the boy. For a long moment, there was silence except for the sound of cars passing on the bridge and the river rushing below. Then Tommy's eyes snapped open, wide with urgency. "The boathouse!" he said, jumping to his feet so quickly that he almost fell. "The old boathouse down the river. She fell through something and got swept there. She's stuck, and the water is getting higher. We have to go now." Max was on his feet instantly, his whole body vibrating with energy. He barked once, sharp and commanding, then took a few steps toward the path that led down from the bridge to the riverbank. He looked back at Tommy, clearly waiting for him to follow. "Wait," Officer Jake said, but Tommy was already moving, his small hand grabbing Max's collar. "There's no time," Tommy insisted, and there was something in his voice that made everyone believe him. "She's hurt and cold, and the rain from last night is making the water come up. Max knows the way, but he needs me to come with him because he can't get her out alone." Sarah grabbed her son's arm. "Tommy, baby, we need to wait for help. Mom, please." Tommy's eyes filled with tears that matched Max's. "I can feel how scared she is. Max has been trying to get help for hours, but nobody understood. If we don't go now, it'll be too late." Officer Jake made a decision. "I'm calling for the fire department and paramedics to meet us at the old boathouse," he said, already on his radio. "But the kids, right. If there's any chance that girl is there and in danger, we can't wait." He looked at Sarah. "Ma'am, I can't force you to let your son come, but..." "I'm coming too," Sarah said firmly. Her medical training wouldn't let her do anything else. If there was an injured child, she might be needed. But Tommy stays with me every second. Max barked again, more urgently this time, and started trotting toward the path. Tommy followed, his small legs working hard to keep up, and Sarah stayed right beside him. Officer Jake was behind them, still coordinating on his radio, and most of the crowd followed at a distance, drawn by the drama unfolding before them. The path down to the riverbank was slippery from the fog and recent rain. Sarah held Tommy's hand tightly as they navigated the wooden steps that zigzagged down the steep slope. Max was ahead of them, but he kept looking back, making sure Tommy was still following. The dog's entire demeanor had changed. Where he had been despondent and grieving on the bridge, he was now focused and determined, every inch the trained search dog he was meant to be. The old boathouse came into view through the fog about a quarter-mile downstream from the bridge. It had been abandoned for years, a relic from the time when this part of the river had been popular for recreational boating. Now it was a rotting structure that most people avoided, considered dangerous by the city but not yet demolished due to budget constraints. The dock leading to it was mostly collapsed, with only a few pilings still standing in the murky water. Max ran straight to the boathouse, his paws slipping on the wet wood as he scrambled across what remained of the dock. He stopped at a section of flooring near the back wall and began scratching frantically at the boards, whining and barking in alternating bursts of frustration and urgency. "She's under there," Tommy said, pulling free from Sarah's grip and running to join Max. She fell through the boards and got washed into something underneath. Officer Jake caught up to them, breathing hard. He could hear sirens in the distance. Backup was coming. He knelt beside where Max was scratching and put his ear to the boards. His face went pale. "I hear something," he said. "It sounds like crying." "There's someone down there." Without hesitation, he began pulling at the rotted boards. They came away easily, too easily, revealing a dark hole that led to the old drainage system under the boathouse. The sound of rushing water echoed up from below, and with it, faintly came the sound of a child's voice. "Help! Please, someone help me." It was weak, scared, but definitely there. Emma Chen was alive, but from the sound of the water, she wouldn't be for much longer if they didn't act fast. "Emma!" Officer Jake called down into the hole. "Emma, this is the police. We're going to get you out." "I can't move," came the terrified reply. "My leg is stuck and the water is getting higher. Please help me." Sarah looked at the hole. It was maybe 2 feet across, far too small for an adult to fit through. The fire department would have equipment to widen it, but that would take time. From the sound of the rushing water below, time was something they didn't have. "How long until the fire department gets here?" she asked Officer Jake. 10 minutes, maybe 15 with the morning traffic," he replied, his face grim. Tommy stepped forward. "I can fit," he said simply. "Absolutely not," Sarah said immediately, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. "Tommy, you're not going down there." "Mom, I have to," Tommy said, and his voice had that strange, mature quality again. "Max is showing me exactly where she is. I can see it in my head. She's stuck between 2 pipes, and the water is already up to her chest. If we wait for the firemen, it'll be too late." Max barked in agreement, then did something that made everyone gasp. He grabbed Tommy's shirt gently in his teeth and pulled him toward the hole, then let go and lay down beside it, looking up at Sarah with those intelligent brown eyes. The message was clear. The dog trusted Tommy to do this. "I can lower him down with my belt and jacket tied together," Officer Jake said quietly to Sarah. "I'll hold on to him the whole time. The second anything seems wrong, I pull him up." Sarah felt like she was being torn in two. Her medical training told her that Emma needed help immediately. The water was rising, and hypothermia would set in quickly even if the girl didn't drown. But this was her baby, her 5-year-old son, and the thought of sending him into danger made her feel physically ill. "Mom," Tommy said, taking her hand, "remember when I knew Mrs. Peterson's cat was stuck in the storm drain last month? Remember how I knew exactly where to find him? This is the same thing, but more important. Max is showing me everything. I can do this." Sarah did remember. Tommy had insisted they check a storm drain 3 blocks from where the cat had gone missing, and sure enough, the poor animal had been there, scared and hungry, but alive. She had written it off as coincidence at the time, But now, the sirens were getting closer, but not close enough. From below, Emma's cries were getting weaker. "Okay," Sarah whispered, hating herself for saying it, but knowing it was the right thing to do. "But you come up the second I say so, understand?" Tommy nodded solemnly, already taking off his jacket. Officer Jake quickly fashioned a makeshift harness from his duty belt and his own jacket, making sure it was secure around Tommy's small body. He tested it several times, making sure he could hold the boy's weight easily. "I'm going to lower you down slowly," Officer Jake explained to Tommy. "Keep talking to me the whole time, so I know you're okay. If anything happens, if you get scared or hurt, you tell me immediately and I'll pull you up. Understand?" "Yes, sir," Tommy said. He looked at Max one more time, and the dog, licked his face, a gesture of encouragement and affection. "Show me where she is, Max." "Keep showing me." Sarah held her breath as Officer Jake began lowering Tommy into the hole. The boy disappeared into the darkness, only the sound of his voice letting them know he was okay. "I can see pipes," Tommy called up. "It's like a tunnel down here. The water is moving really fast. I can hear Emma." "Be careful, baby," Sarah called down, her hands clenched so tightly her nails were digging into her palms. "I see her!" Tommy's voice was excited but strained. "She's about 10 feet away. Her leg is caught between two pipes. The water is up to her shoulders now." Officer Jake looked at Sarah. The makeshift rope wouldn't reach that far. They needed more length. "Use my jacket," Sarah said immediately, already pulling it off. Officer Jake quickly added it to their improvised rope, giving Tommy the extra length he needed. Down in the drainage tunnel, Tommy was up to his waist in cold, rushing water. It was dark except for the small amount of light coming from the hole above, and a faint glow from somewhere downstream. He could see Emma clearly now, though he wasn't sure how. It was like Max was lending him the dog's superior vision, showing him exactly where to go and what to do. Emma was wedged between two drainage pipes, her leg twisted at an angle that made Tommy's stomach hurt to look at. Her face was pale, her lips blue from the cold, and the water was rising fast. Her yellow raincoat was torn and dirty, and her eyes were wide with terror. "Emma," Tommy said, trying to sound calm and grown up like his mom did when she was helping scared patients. "I'm Tommy. I'm here to help you." "I want my mommy," Emma sobbed, her teeth chattering. "I'm so cold." "Your mommy is coming," Tommy assured her, wading closer through the rushing water. It was hard to keep his balance, and he was grateful for the rope around his middle that kept him connected to the world above. "But first, we need to get you out. Can you move at all?" "My leg hurts so bad," Emma cried. "I think it's broken." Tommy reached her and saw that she was right. Her leg was definitely broken, bent at an unnatural angle where it was caught between the pipes. But the bigger problem was the water. It was rising faster now, already up to Emma's chin. In a few more minutes, she wouldn't be able to keep her head above it. "Tommy, what's happening down there?" Officer Jake's voice echoed down from above. "Her leg is broken and stuck," Tommy called back. "The water is almost over her head." He could hear urgent voices above, more sirens arriving, but he knew they didn't have time to wait. He closed his eyes for a second, and immediately Max's presence filled his mind. The dog was showing him something, a memory of training, of how to support someone in water, how to keep them calm. "Emma, I need you to be really brave," Tommy said, moving behind her and wrapping his small arms around her chest, keeping her head above the rising water. "I'm going to hold you up while we figure out how to free your leg." The water was up to Tommy's chest now, and he could feel the current trying to pull him away. Only the rope and his grip on Emma kept him in place. He studied how her leg was caught, trying to see if there was any way to free it without causing more damage. "There's a piece of metal," he said, both to Emma and to the adults above. "It's bent around her ankle. If I can move it just a little bit." He reached down into the murky water, his face going under for a moment as he felt around Emma's trapped leg. His fingers found the bent piece of metal, sharp and rusty. He pulled at it with all his 5-year-old strength, but it wouldn't budge. Above, Max was going crazy, barking and whining, scratching at the boards around the hole as if trying to make it bigger. Sarah understood his frustration. She could hear the water rising, could hear the strain in Tommy's voice, and every maternal instinct screamed at her to do something, anything. "The fire department is here," someone shouted, and Sarah turned to see firefighters running toward them with equipment. But they would need time to set up, time to assess the situation, time Emma and Tommy didn't have. "The water's at my neck," Tommy called up, his voice high with fear now. "I can't keep us both up much longer." Without warning, Max jumped. The big German shepherd launched himself into the hole, disappearing into the darkness below before anyone could stop him. Sarah screamed, Officer Jake cursed, and everyone held their breath. In the tunnel, Tommy felt Max splash into the water beside him. The dog was swimming strongly despite the current, and he moved immediately to Emma's trapped leg. Tommy felt more than saw what happened next. Max bit down on the bent metal piece, using his powerful jaws to pull it away from Emma's ankle. The metal groaned and shifted, and suddenly Emma's leg was free. "She's loose!" Tommy shouted, just as the water reached his chin. "Pull us up! Pull us up now!" Officer Jake didn't need to be told twice. He hauled on the makeshift rope with all his strength, helped by 2 firefighters who had just arrived. Tommy held on to Emma with one arm and Max's collar with the other, the dog swimming beside them as they were pulled through the rushing water toward the hole. Tommy emerged first, gasping and coughing, still clutching Emma, who was barely conscious. Hands reached for them, pulling them up and out into the foggy morning air. Max came up last, hauling himself out with Sarah and a firefighter's help, water streaming from his fur. Paramedics were there immediately, taking Emma from Tommy's arms and beginning emergency treatment. Sarah wrapped her son in a blanket, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe, tears streaming down her face. "Don't ever do that again," she whispered. "Don't you ever, ever do that again." "I had to, Mom," Tommy said, his teeth chattering from the cold. "Max showed me she was going to die if I didn't." The Chen family arrived just as Emma was being loaded into the ambulance. David and Lisa Chen looked like they had aged 10 years overnight, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. When they saw Emma, alive and conscious though injured, they both broke down sobbing. "My baby!" Lisa cried, climbing into the ambulance to be with her daughter. "Oh, my sweet baby!" David Chen approached Sarah and Tommy, his eyes red with tears. "The police told us what your son did," he said, his voice breaking. "How can we ever thank you? He saved her life." "It wasn't just me," Tommy said, still shivering despite the blanket. "It was Max. He knew where she was the whole time. He was trying to tell everyone, but only I could understand him." David looked at his dog, who was sitting beside Tommy, still dripping wet but alert and watchful. "He's been trained for search and rescue since he was a puppy," David explained. "But we've never seen him act like this. The way he was on that bridge, crying actual tears." "He loves Emma," Tommy said simply. "He was so sad because he couldn't save her by himself. He needed help, but nobody could hear what he was trying to say." Officer Jake, who had been giving his report to the fire chief, came over to them. "The paramedics say Emma's going to be okay," he told them. "Broken leg, hypothermia, but nothing life-threatening thanks to your boy's quick action." He knelt down to Tommy's level. "You're a hero, kid. What you did down there was incredibly brave." Tommy shook his head. "Max is the hero. I just helped, but Officer Jake wasn't done. Can I ask you something? How did you really know what Max was thinking? I've been a cop for 10 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened today." Tommy looked at his mother, then back at the officer. He seemed to be deciding whether to share something important. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "Last year, I fell in our neighbor's pool," he said. "I couldn't swim yet, and nobody saw me fall. I was drowning, and everything went dark. But then their dog, Buster, jumped in and pulled me out. He saved my life." Sarah gasped. She remembered that day vividly, the terror of finding Tommy unconscious by the pool, Buster barking frantically beside him. The doctors had said he was lucky to have no permanent damage, that another minute or two, and it would have been too late. "Ever since then," Tommy continued, "I can hear them. Not with words, but with feelings and pictures in my head. Dogs, cats, sometimes birds. They show me things, tell me things. Mom thought I was just imagining it, but I wasn't." He looked at Max, who was watching him with those intelligent brown eyes. "Max is special, though. He's the clearest one I've ever heard. It's like he was waiting for someone who could understand him, and when he saw me on the bridge, he knew." The crowd that had followed them from the bridge was silent, processing this. Incredible story. Some looked skeptical, but most had seen too much to doubt. They had watched a 5-year-old boy understand things about a dog and a missing girl that he couldn't possibly have known any other way. Sarah's phone rang, breaking the moment. It was the hospital, wondering where she was. She had completely forgotten about work in the chaos of the morning. As she explained the situation to her supervisor, she watched Tommy sitting with Max, the boy's small hand resting on the dog's head. They looked peaceful together, connected in a way that defied explanation. The story should have ended there, with Emma safe and Tommy hailed as a hero. But, as Sarah would soon learn, some connections run deeper than a single rescue, and some gifts, once revealed, cannot be hidden again. Over the next few hours, the story spread like wildfire through their small town. Someone in the crowd had recorded video of Tommy with Max on the bridge, and by noon, it was on every local news channel. "Boy who speaks to dog saves, missing girl," read the headlines, and reporters began showing up at Sarah's house, wanting interviews, wanting to understand how a 5-year-old had done what trained rescue workers couldn't. Sarah tried to shield Tommy from the attention, but it was impossible. Their phone rang constantly, their doorbell chimed every few minutes, and when she looked out the window, she could see news vans parked along their quiet street. Tommy, for his part, seemed unbothered by the chaos. He sat in his room with his dinosaur, occasionally looking out the window at the reporters with mild curiosity. "They all want to know how I did it," he said to Sarah when she brought him lunch, "but I don't know how to explain it better. Max showed me, and I understood. That's all." That evening, the Chen family came to visit. Emma was in a cast and wheelchair, but she was smiling. Her color returned to normal. The moment she saw Tommy, she held out her arms for a hug. "You saved me," she said simply. "The water was so cold, and I was so scared, and then you were there." Tommy hugged her back carefully, mindful of her injuries. "Max saved you," he corrected. "I just helped." David Chen cleared his throat. "We've been talking," he said, looking at Sarah. "What Tommy did today, his connection with Max, it's extraordinary. We'd like to propose something." Lisa Chen continued. "Max is a trained search and rescue dog, but he's never been able to work to his full potential, because he needs a handler who truly understands him. We think Tommy might be that handler." Sarah started to protest. "He's only 5 years old." "We're not suggesting he start now," David said quickly. "But as he grows, with proper training, Tommy could help save lives. Max is only 4 years old. He has many working years ahead of him. We could start with simple training sessions, teaching Tommy the proper commands and procedures. It would be completely safe, always supervised." Tommy's eyes lit up. "Could I really work with Max?" "If your mother agrees," Lisa said, smiling at the boy's enthusiasm. "We could start with weekly sessions, just getting you two used to working together formally. Max already trusts you completely, which is the hardest part of training a handler dog team." Sarah felt overwhelmed. This morning, she had been worried about being late to work. Now she was being asked to let her 5-year-old son train as a search and rescue handler. But looking at Tommy's excited face and remembering how he had saved Emma's life, she found herself nodding. "We can try it," she said, "but school comes first, and the moment it becomes too much, we stop." Tommy jumped up and hugged her, then ran to Max, who had been lying quietly by the door. The dog's tail wagged as Tommy threw his arms around his neck, and Sarah could swear she saw understanding in those brown eyes. Max knew things were changing, and he seemed pleased. The training sessions began the following week. Every Saturday, Sarah would drive Tommy to the Chen's property, where they had set up a training area in their large backyard. David, who had trained dogs as a hobby before his corporate career took over, worked with Tommy on basic commands and handling techniques. But it quickly became clear that Tommy and Max operated on a different level than typical handler dog teams. While other handlers had to teach their dogs to alert to specific scents or sounds, Max seemed to communicate directly with Tommy. The boy would close his eyes, touch Max's head, and then announce exactly where a hidden object was located, or which path a lost volunteer had taken through the woods behind the house. It was uncanny, and even David, with all his experience, was amazed. "It's like they share a consciousness," he told Sarah one afternoon, as they watched Tommy and Max work through a complex search pattern. "I've never seen anything like it." Word of Tommy's gift spread beyond their small town. A professor from the state university came to observe. bringing equipment to measure electromagnetic fields and other phenomena. She found nothing unusual on her instruments, but she left convinced that something special was happening between the boy and the dog. "There are documented cases of extreme human-animal bonds," she told Sarah, "usually between people who have had near-death experiences and the animals that saved them. It's as if the trauma creates a connection that goes beyond normal communication." 3 months after the rescue at the bridge, Tommy and Max were invited to assist in their first official search. An elderly man with dementia had wandered away from his care facility, and traditional search methods had failed to find him after 2 days. The family was desperate, and the police were willing to try anything. Sarah was terrified to let Tommy participate in a real search, but the boy was insistent. "Max says the man is confused and scared," Tommy told her. "He's hiding because he thinks people are trying to hurt him. Max can find him, but he needs me to explain to the searchers that they have to approach carefully." The search area was a large wooded park on the edge of town. Tommy and Max worked with Officer Jake, who had become a friend to the family since the bridge incident. As soon as they arrived at the park, Max's demeanor changed. He became focused, professional, his nose working the air currents. Tommy placed his hand on Max's head and closed his eyes. After a moment, he pointed toward a dense thicket of bushes that had already been searched twice. "He's in there," Tommy said with certainty, "but he's made himself a hiding spot under some fallen branches. He thinks he's in the war again. He's scared of the uniforms." Officer Jake looked skeptical, but he had learned to trust Tommy's insights. He had the uniformed officers hang back while he and a plainclothes detective approached the thicket. Sure enough, hidden beneath carefully arranged branches and leaves, they found the missing man. He was dehydrated and confused but alive, and he came willingly when the detective, dressed in civilian clothes, gently coaxed him out. The successful search made the news again, and suddenly Tommy and Max were in demand. Requests came from all over the state for their help in finding missing people. Sarah tried to limit their involvement, worried about the pressure on her young son, but Tommy seemed to thrive on the work. He was helping people, saving lives, and his connection with Max grew stronger with each search. But not everyone was happy about Tommy's gift. Some people called it unnatural, said it was impossible, that Sarah must be coaching him somehow. Others were jealous that a 5-year-old boy could do what trained professionals couldn't. The criticism hurt, especially when it came from people in their own community who had known them for years. One afternoon, Sarah came home from work to find graffiti spray-painted on their garage door. "Freak," it said in large red letters. Tommy saw it before she could cover it up, and for the first time since his gift had been revealed, she saw him cry. "Why are they mean to me, Mom?" he asked, tears rolling down his cheeks. "I'm just trying to help." Sarah held him close, her own eyes burning with tears of anger and frustration. "Some people are afraid of things they don't understand, baby. But what you can do is a gift, and don't you ever let anyone make you feel bad about it." That night, she seriously considered stopping the search work, moving to another town where they could start fresh. But then the phone rang. It was a mother in the next county whose autistic son had wandered away from their camping site. The boy was nonverbal and wouldn't respond to calls. They needed Tommy and Max. Sarah looked at her son, who was listening to her side of the conversation with hopeful eyes. She thought about Emma Chen, alive because of Tommy's bravery. She thought about the elderly man, and safe because Tommy understood what others couldn't. And she made her decision. "We'll be there in an hour," she told the desperate mother. The search for the autistic boy was one of their most challenging yet. The camping area was massive, with dense forest and steep ravines. The boy had been missing for 6 hours, and with night falling and temperatures dropping, time was critical. Max worked differently this time, his nose to the ground, following a scent trail that twisted and turned through the trees. Tommy had to jog to keep up, his hand occasionally touching Max's back to maintain their connection. "He's not scared," Tommy announced to the search team. "He's following something he thinks is pretty." The boy's mother gasped. "He loves butterflies. He'll follow them for hours if we let him." Tommy nodded, not surprised. Max was showing him images of the boy's journey, following a group of butterflies deeper and deeper into the forest. They tracked him for nearly 2 hours, the trail leading them to a part of the forest that hadn't been searched yet because it was considered too far for a child to have traveled. They found him sitting by a small stream, perfectly calm, watching the last butterflies of the day settle on the wildflowers. He looked up when Max approached, showing no fear of the large dog, and actually smiled when Max licked his face. "He says the butterflies told him to wait here," Tommy said quietly to the boy's mother. "He knew you would find him." The mother looked at Tommy strangely. "He doesn't speak." "How could he tell you that?" Tommy shrugged. "The same way Max tells me things. Not with words." The reunion between mother and son was emotional, and as the search team celebrated another successful rescue, Officer Jake pulled Sarah aside. "Your boy is something special," he said. "I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never seen anything like what he can do. But I want you to know, there are people who won't understand, who might try to exploit or hurt him because of it." Sarah nodded, the graffiti on their garage still fresh in her mind. "I know, I'm trying to protect him, but he wants to help people. How do I balance that?" Officer Jake smiled. "The same way you've been doing it, one day at a time, one search at a time, and know that you have friends here who will support you both." As fall turned to winter, Tommy and Max's reputation grew. They were called in for increasingly difficult searches, and their success rate was remarkable. Tommy started kindergarten, where he was treated like a celebrity by some kids and avoided by others who had heard their parents whisper about the strange boy who talks to animals. Sarah watched her son navigate these challenges with a maturity beyond his years. He never boasted about his abilities, never made other kids feel inferior, and always credited Max with their successes. Slowly, most of his classmates came to accept him, especially after he helped find the class hamster that had escaped its cage. But the real test came just before Christmas. A massive winter storm hit the region, dumping 2 feet of snow in 12 hours. In the midst of the blizzard, 3 children went missing from a youth group sledding trip. They had gone down a hill and never came back up. The storm was so severe that helicopters couldn't fly, and visibility was near zero. The search and rescue teams were overwhelmed, dealing with multiple emergencies from the storm. The parents of the missing children were frantic. One of them, having heard about Tommy and Max, called Sarah directly. "Please," the father begged. "I know it's dangerous, but those kids don't have much time in this cold." Sarah looked out at the blizzard. She couldn't see across the street. The snow was falling so hard. Taking Tommy out in this weather seemed insane. But 3 children were missing, and every minute counted. "Max wants to go," Tommy said from behind her. She turned to see him already putting on his winter coat. "He says he can find them, but we have to hurry." "Tommy, it's too dangerous." "Mom, they're in a snow cave." The sled hit something and threw them into a drift. "They're okay for now, but the snow is getting heavier on top of them. If we don't go now, they won't be able to breathe." The specificity of his knowledge, the urgency in his voice, made Sarah's decision for her. She called Officer Jake, who immediately offered to drive them in his 4-wheel drive police vehicle. Within minutes, they were heading into the storm. The sledding hill was in chaos when they arrived. Parents huddled together in the parking lot, some crying, others shouting into phones, trying to coordinate search efforts. The youth group leaders looked devastated, explaining over and over to the police how the children had simply vanished into the white wall of snow. Officer Jake parked as close as he could to the hill, but the wind was so strong it nearly knocked Tommy over when he got out of the car. Sarah held him tightly, second-guessing her decision to bring him out in such dangerous conditions. Max, however, seemed energized by the storm. His thick fur protected him from the cold, and his powerful body moved easily through the deep snow. "Where did they go down?" Officer Jake asked one of the youth leaders, shouting to be heard over the wind. The young man pointed toward the hill, though it was barely visible through the snow. "They went down the regular run, but at the bottom, instead of stopping where they usually do, they kept going. We think they hit the jump someone built and went into the trees." Tommy was already moving, his small hand on Max's collar. The dog was pulling him toward the hill, not down the regular run, but off to the side where the trees were thicker. Sarah and Officer Jake struggled to keep up, the snow now up to Tommy's waist in some places. "They didn't go down the regular way," Tommy called back. "They tried to take a shortcut." "Max can smell them." The search team that had been working the area came over, their faces red with cold and frustration. The lead searcher, a man named Carl, who Sarah recognized from previous searches, looked skeptical. "We've been over that area 3 times, Carl said. "There's no sign of them." Tommy closed his eyes, his hand firmly on Max's head. When he opened them, there was an urgency that made everyone pay attention. "They're under the snow, about 50 yards into the trees," he said, pointing to a specific area. Their sled hit a fallen log hidden by the snow, and they got thrown into a drift. The snow collapsed around them and made a cave. They're alive, but scared, and the air is getting thin. Carl started to argue, but Officer Jake cut him off. "We follow the boy. He hasn't been wrong yet." They trudged through the deep snow, Max leading the way with Tommy beside him. The dog suddenly stopped and began digging frantically at what looked like an ordinary snowdrift. Within seconds, his powerful paws had revealed something red, a piece of clothing. "Here!" Officer Jake shouted. "They're here!" The search team converged on the spot, carefully digging to avoid causing a collapse. They found the 3 children huddled together in a small air pocket, their sled broken beside them. They were cold and scared, but alive, protected by the insulating snow that had nearly become their tomb. As the children were pulled out and wrapped in warm blankets, their parents sobbing with relief, one of the kids, a girl about 10 years old, looked at Tommy with wide eyes. "I heard a dog barking," she said through chattering teeth. "Even under the snow, I heard barking." "I knew someone would find us." Tommy smiled and hugged Max, who was shaking the snow from his fur, looking pleased with himself. "Max was calling to you," Tommy explained. "He wanted you to know help was coming." The rescue made national news. A 5-year-old boy and his dog finding 3 children buried in snow during a blizzard was the kind of story that captured everyone's attention. The phone at Sarah's house rang constantly with interview requests, and reporters camped outside despite the continuing storm. But fame brought problems Sarah hadn't anticipated. A man showed up at their door, claiming Tommy was his son, that Sarah had stolen him as a baby. He had no proof, of course, and the police quickly determined he was mentally ill, but it shook Sarah badly. Then came the letters from people wanting Tommy to find their missing pets, lost jewelry, even one person who wanted him to locate buried treasure. "We need to set boundaries," Sarah told Officer Jake one evening as they sorted through the latest pile of requests. "Tommy's still just a little boy. He needs a normal childhood," Officer Jake agreed. "What if we set up a system? Tommy and Max only work official searches, ones where lives are at stake. Everything goes through the police department first." It was a good plan, but even with restrictions, Tommy and Max were called out at least once a month. Each search deepened the bond between boy and dog, and Tommy's abilities seemed to grow stronger. He started being able to sense things about the missing people, their emotional state, their injuries, sometimes even their thoughts in the moments before they disappeared. One spring afternoon, Tommy came home from school unusually quiet. Sarah found him in his room, sitting on his bed with Max beside him, both of them staring out the window. "What's wrong, baby?" Sarah asked, sitting beside him. Tommy leaned against her, his small body tense. "Max is getting older," he said quietly. "He showed me today. His heart is getting tired." Sarah's own heart clenched. Max was only 5 years old, still young for a German Shepherd, but the intense work he did, the emotional toll of searches, might be aging him faster than normal. "We should have Dr. Winters check him out," Sarah suggested, referring to the veterinarian who had been treating Max since they started working together. Tommy shook his head. "He's not sick. He's just tired. He says he has more work to do first, important work, but then he'll need to rest." Sarah didn't know what to say to that. The bond between Tommy and Max had taught her to trust her son's insights, even when they seemed impossible. If Tommy said Max was telling him something, she believed it. The important work Max had mentioned came sooner than expected. 2 weeks later, on a beautiful Saturday morning, the phone rang with an emergency that would test Tommy and Max like never before. A school bus full of children had gone off the road during a field trip to the mountains. The bus had rolled down an embankment and landed in a ravine. Some children had been thrown from the bus and were missing in the dense forest. The terrain was so rough that rescue teams were having trouble even reaching the crash site. "We need Max's nose," Officer Jake said when he called. "And we need Tommy to help us understand where the kids might have gone. Some of them are injured and might be hiding." Sarah's hands shook as she helped Tommy get ready. A bus full of children. It was every parent's nightmare. She thought about keeping Tommy home, safe from the trauma of such a massive disaster. But she knew he would never forgive her if children died because she held him back. The scene at the crash site was overwhelming. The bus lay on its side at the bottom of a steep ravine, Windows shattered, the yellow paint scraped and dented. Emergency vehicles were everywhere, their lights flashing in chaotic patterns. Parents were arriving, some screaming, others standing in shocked silence. Tommy took one look at the scene and grabbed Max's collar tightly. "There are 5 kids missing," he said immediately. 3 went uphill, trying to get back to the road. 2 went downhill, following the creek. The incident commander, a stern woman named Chief Patterson, looked skeptical. "How can you possibly know that?" "Max can smell their trails," Tommy said simply. "And I can feel their fear. The 3 going uphill are together, helping each other. The 2 going downhill." He paused, his face paling. "One of them is hurt really bad." Chief Patterson had heard about Tommy and Max's abilities, but seeing it in person was different. She made a quick decision. Take a team and find the 2 by the creek first if they're injured worse. Max was already moving, his nose to the ground, following an invisible trail down the steep slope toward the sound of running water. Tommy had to be carried part of the way by Officer Jake, the terrain too difficult for his small legs, but he never let go of his connection to Max. They found the first child quickly, a boy about 8 years old sitting by the creek, holding his clearly broken arm and crying. But it was the second child that made everyone's blood run cold. A girl, maybe 7 years old, was lying face down in the shallow water, not moving. Officer Jake splashed into the creek and pulled her out. She was breathing but unconscious, a large gash on her head bleeding steadily. The paramedic with them immediately began working on her, while Officer Jake radioed for a helicopter evacuation. "She fell from up there," Tommy said, pointing to a cliff about 20 feet above them. "She was trying to follow the boy but slipped on the loose rocks." While the medical team worked on the injured children, Tommy and Max turned their attention to finding the other 3. Max led them back up the slope, past the crashed bus where rescue workers were still extracting injured children, and into the thick forest on the other side of the road. The trail was harder to follow here. The 3 children had split up at some point, probably in panic, and Max kept stopping, his head swiveling as he tried to decide which scent to follow first. "They're scared and confused," Tommy said, his eyes closed in concentration. "They think they're being followed by something." "Followed?" Chief Patterson asked, now fully believing in Tommy's abilities. "By what?" Tommy's eyes snapped open, wide with fear. "There's a bear." "Max can smell it. It's been tracking the children." The search took on a new urgency. Chief Patterson called for the Wildlife Control Unit while the search team spread out, calling for the children and making noise to scare off the bear. Max found the first child, a girl hiding in a hollow tree, too terrified to come out even when she heard the searchers calling. Tommy approached her slowly, his voice gentle. "Hi, I'm Tommy. This is Max. We're here to help you." The girl, who couldn't have been more than 6, looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "There's a monster," she whispered. "I heard it growling." "That was a bear," Tommy explained, "but Max scared it away. See how brave he is? He won't let anything hurt you." Max, as if understanding his role, sat down and offered his paw to the girl. She giggled despite her fear and shook it, then allowed Tommy to coax her out of the tree. Finding the other 2 children took longer. They had climbed higher up the mountain, trying to reach what they thought was the road, but was actually just a logging trail. Max tracked them for over an hour, the terrain getting increasingly difficult. Finally, they heard voices, children's voices arguing. "We should go back down." "No, the road is up here. I know it is." "I want my mom." The search team found them standing at the edge of a small cliff, afraid to go forward or back. They were cold, scratched from pushing through brush, but otherwise unharmed. When they saw the search team, both boys burst into tears of relief. As the children were reunited with their families, Tommy stood apart with Max, both of them exhausted from the emotional and physical toll of the search. Sarah wrapped a blanket around her son's shoulders, noticing how pale he looked. "You did amazing, baby," she whispered. Tommy leaned against her, his eyes already drooping. "Max did all the work. I just listened." But Chief Patterson, who had been watching them throughout the search, approached with a different perspective. "What your son did today saved lives," she told Sarah. "The girl in the creek would have died if we hadn't found her when we did. And those boys on the cliff were about to try something desperate. I've been in search and rescue for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like the connection between your son and that dog." She handed Sarah a business card. "I run a national search and rescue training program. When Tommy's older, if he's interested, I'd like to talk about advanced training. What he has is a gift that could save hundreds of lives." Sarah took the card, but her mind was on Tommy's earlier words about Max getting tired. How many more searches could they do? How much more could she ask of both her son and the remarkable dog that had become such a crucial part of their lives? That night, as Sarah tucked Tommy into bed, he grabbed her hand. "Mom, Max showed me something today." "What's that, sweetie?" "There's another dog coming. A puppy. Max says he needs to start teaching him soon, so he'll be ready when—" Tommy trailed off, his eyes filling with tears. "When what, baby?" "When Max has to go away," Tommy whispered. "He says not yet, but someday, and we need to be ready." Sarah felt her own eyes burn with tears. The thought of losing Max was unbearable, not just for Tommy, but for all the families they had helped, all the lives they had saved. But if Tommy was right, if Max was somehow preparing for his own replacement, then maybe the gift they shared wouldn't end with one remarkable dog. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. David Chen stood at their door, but he wasn't alone. Beside him, on a leash, was a German Shepherd puppy, maybe 3 months old, with ears too big for his head and paws he hadn't grown into yet. "This is Zeus," David said, smiling at Tommy's shocked expression. "He's from the same bloodline as Max, actually Max's nephew. His mother was Max's sister. I've been working with the breeder since Emma's rescue, waiting for the right puppy." Tommy looked at Max, who was studying the puppy with interest. The older dog walked over and sniffed the puppy thoroughly, then gave him a gentle lick on the head. Zeus immediately tried to play, bouncing around Max with uncoordinated puppy enthusiasm. "Max says yes," Tommy announced, his face bright with joy. "He says Zeus has the gift too, but he needs to learn." And so began a new chapter in their lives. Zeus moved in with them, and Max took on the role of teacher with remarkable patience. The puppy followed Max everywhere, mimicking his movements, learning by observation. Tommy worked with both dogs, and Sarah watched in amazement as Zeus began to respond to Tommy in the same way Max did, that mysterious connection already starting to form. The training wasn't without challenges. Zeus was a puppy after all, with all the energy and mischief that entailed. He chewed through 3 of Tommy's shoes, dug holes in the backyard, and once ate an entire batch of cookies Sarah had left cooling on the counter. But when it came to search training, he was focused and eager, as if he understood the importance of what he was learning. 6 months passed, and Zeus grew rapidly, though he was still obviously young and playful compared to Max's dignified bearing. The older dog's prediction about getting tired seemed to have been premature. Max continued to work searches with his usual skill and dedication. But Sarah noticed small changes. He moved a bit slower, needed more rest after searches. And sometimes Tommy would find him just sitting and staring into the distance, as if seeing something only he could perceive. One autumn evening, they received a call that would prove to be Max's most important case. A 12-year-old boy with autism had wandered away from his home in the middle of the night. He had been missing for over 24 hours, and with temperatures dropping and rain forecasted, the situation was becoming desperate. The boy's name was Michael, and his parents were beside themselves with worry. "He doesn't understand danger," his mother explained through tears. "He loves trains, obsessed with them. We live near the old railroad tracks, but we've searched there thoroughly." Tommy put his hand on Max's head and closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened them with a puzzled expression. "Max says he's underground, somewhere dark and echoey. He can hear trains but not see them." The search coordinator pulled up maps of the area. "There are some old maintenance tunnels that run under the railroad tracks," he said. "They've been sealed for years, but maybe." Max was already moving, his nose working overtime as he followed a scent trail that led away from Michael's house. Zeus trotted alongside, watching and learning, occasionally putting his nose down to smell what Max was smelling. They tracked Michael's path through the neighborhood, across a park, and to a section of chain-link fence that had been cut and pulled back. On the other side of the fence was an old railroad maintenance yard, abandoned and overgrown. Max led them through the maze of rusted equipment and collapsed buildings to what looked like a solid concrete wall, but Max scratched at one section, whining urgently. Officer Jake examined the wall and found that what looked like solid concrete was actually a piece of plywood painted to match. Behind it was a narrow opening that led into darkness. "Michael!" his father called into the tunnel. "Michael, it's Dad. Can you hear me?" From deep in the tunnel came a faint sound. Not a voice, but a rhythmic banging, like someone hitting metal with a stick. "He's in there," Tommy said with certainty. "He's scared, but okay." He went in to be closer to the trains, but then got lost in the dark. He's been hitting the pipes to make train sounds. The tunnel was too narrow for most of the adults, and they couldn't risk sending Tommy into an unknown structure. But they could send Max. The dog looked at Tommy, seemed to receive some silent instruction, and plunged into the darkness. They waited tensely, listening to Max's barks echoing from deep in the tunnel. Then the barking stopped, replaced by a different sound. Footsteps, getting closer. Max emerged from the tunnel, gently gripping Michael's sleeve in his teeth, leading the boy out of the darkness. Michael was dirty, cold, and dehydrated, but otherwise unharmed. He didn't speak. His parents said he rarely did, but he put his arms around Max's neck and held on tight, not wanting to let go even when the paramedics needed to examine him. "He says thank you," Tommy told Michael's parents. "Not with words, but I can feel it. He says Max's fur smells like sunshine." Michael's mother looked at Tommy in shock. That's what he always says about our cat, that she smells like sunshine. How could you know that?" Tommy shrugged, that simple gesture that had become his response to questions about his gift. "The same way Max knows things. We just do." The rescue was Max's last official search. That night, he collapsed at home, his breathing labored, his strong body suddenly fragile. Dr. Winters came immediately, and her diagnosis was gentle but clear. Max's heart was failing. He had been hiding his weakness, pushing through pain to do his job, but his body couldn't continue. "He's not in pain, doctor," Winters assured them, as Max lay on his favorite bed in the living room, Zeus curled up beside him. "But his heart is tired. He's earned his rest." Tommy sat with Max all night, his small hand never leaving the dog's head. They seemed to be having a conversation no one else could hear. Tommy sometimes nodding, sometimes whispering responses to unheard questions. In the morning, Max rallied enough to go outside. He walked slowly to the backyard, Zeus on one side, Tommy on the other. He stood in his favorite spot under the oak tree, nose lifted to catch the morning breeze. Then he looked at Zeus, touched noses with the younger dog, in what was clearly a passing of responsibility, and lay down in the soft grass. "He says he's ready," Tommy whispered, tears streaming down his face. "He says Zeus knows everything he needs to know, and I'll be okay." Max closed his eyes, his breathing becoming slower, more peaceful. Tommy began to sing softly, a lullaby Sarah had sung to him when he was younger. Zeus lay down beside Max, his head on the older dog's shoulder, standing guard. Max passed away as the sun broke through the morning clouds, painting the yard in golden light. Tommy said he saw Max's spirit rise from his body, young and strong again, running toward a bridge made of rainbow light where other dogs were waiting for him. "He's not really gone," Tommy told Sarah through his tears. "He says he'll watch over us, and he'll be there to teach Zeus in dreams, just like the dogs before him taught him." They buried Max under the oak tree, and half the town came to pay their respects. Every family they had helped, every person Max had found, came to honor the remarkable dog who had saved so many lives. The ceremony was simple but moving, with Officer Jake speaking about bravery and service, and Chief Patterson presenting a Medal of Honor that was placed on Max's grave. Emma Chen, now fully recovered from her accident years ago, read a poem she had written about the dog who had refused to give up on her. Michael's parents brought a model train to place on the grave, saying Max had given them their son back. The three children from the bus crash, now teenagers, stood together in silent tribute, but it was Tommy who gave the most moving tribute. Standing beside the grave with Zeus at his side, he spoke not about what Max had done, but who Max had been. "Max wasn't just a search dog," Tommy said, his young voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "He was a teacher, a protector, and a friend. He showed me that being different isn't something to be ashamed of, that having a gift means you have a responsibility to help others. He taught Zeus to be brave, and he taught me to listen not just with my ears, but with my heart. He looked down at Zeus, who was sitting at attention, as if he understood the solemnity of the moment. Max said his work isn't done. It's just changing. Every time Zeus and I save someone, Max will be with us. Every time we bring someone home, it's because Max showed us how. In the weeks that followed, Zeus began to come into his own. His connection with Tommy, while different from what Tommy had shared with Max, was equally strong. Where Max had been serious and focused, Zeus brought a playful energy to their work. He was eager, sometimes too eager, but his instincts were sharp and his nose was possibly even better than Max's had been. Their first official search with Zeus came 3 months after Max's passing. A toddler had wandered away from a family picnic in a large state park. The child had been missing for only an hour, but with a river nearby and dense woods in every direction, every minute counted. Zeus was nervous at first, looking around as if expecting Max to appear and take over. But Tommy knelt beside him, placed his hand on the young dog's head, and whispered, "Max says you can do this." He's watching. Whether it was Tommy's confidence or something more mystical, Zeus suddenly straightened, his nose went to the ground, and he began tracking with the same intensity Sarah had seen in Max so many times. Within 30 minutes, they found the toddler happily playing in a shallow creek, completely unaware of the panic he had caused. As the child was reunited with his sobbing parents, Tommy smiled and looked up at the sky. "Good job, Max," he whispered, and Zeus barked once as if in agreement. Life settled into a new rhythm. Tommy was in 2nd grade now, reading at a 5th grade level and showing an unusual aptitude for science, particularly animal biology. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, encouraged his interests, even allowing him to bring Zeus to school for a presentation on search and rescue dogs. The other children, who had once been wary of Tommy's unusual abilities, now saw him as something of a hero. He never bragged, never made anyone feel inferior, and always gave credit to Zeus and the memory of Max. Slowly, he made friends, children who accepted him for who he was, gift and all. Sarah watched her son grow with a mixture of pride and worry. The gift that had brought so much good into the world also set him apart, made him different in ways that would always be challenging. But seeing him with Zeus, watching them work together to save lives, she knew this was his path. One evening, as she was helping Tommy with his homework, he suddenly looked up with that expression she had come to recognize, the look that meant he was receiving information from somewhere beyond normal senses. "Mom," he said slowly, "Zeus is showing me something. There's going to be another dog soon, not to replace Zeus, but to work with him." Sarah frowned. "Another dog? Tommy, I don't think we can handle 3 dogs." "Not 3, Tommy said, shaking his head. "Zeus and the new one. They'll be a team." He paused, his eyes distant. "And they won't be the only team. There will be others. Kids like me, dogs like Zeus. We're going to teach them." "Teach them? Tommy, you're 7 years old." Tommy looked at her with those serious eyes that sometimes seemed so much older than his years. "Not now, but someday. Max showed me. This gift, it's not just for me. There are others who have it, or could have it, but they don't know how to use it. We're going to help them." Sarah didn't know what to say to that. The idea of Tommy teaching others, of there being more children with his abilities, was both exciting and terrifying. But if she had learned anything from their journey with Max and now Zeus, it was to trust her son's insights. A month later, Chief Patterson called with an unusual request. A girl in another state, 9-year-old Lily, had been showing signs of an unusual connection with animals. Her parents were frightened and confused, not knowing what to do with a daughter who claimed she could understand what dogs were thinking. "I remembered what Tommy said at Max's memorial," Chief Patterson explained, "about gifts and responsibilities. I thought maybe he could help this girl understand what's happening to her." Sarah was hesitant, but Tommy was insistent. "She's scared," he said. "She thinks something's wrong with her." I remember feeling that way before Max showed me it was okay. They arranged a video call first. Lily was a shy girl with red hair and freckles who barely looked at the camera. But when Tommy started talking about his experiences with Max and Zeus, she slowly opened up. "My dog, Buddy, he shows me pictures in my head," she admitted quietly. "Mom thinks I'm making it up." "You're not," Tommy assured her. "It's real. And it's special. Can Buddy find things? Does he know when people are sad or hurt?" Lily nodded eagerly. "He always knows. He found my grandma when she fell in the garden and couldn't call for help. And he knew my brother was sick before anyone else did. Over the next few weeks, Tommy became Lily's mentor, teaching her through video calls how to strengthen her connection with Buddy, how to interpret what she was sensing, and most importantly, that her gift was something to be treasured, not feared. The success with Lily led to more requests. Chief Patterson, recognizing the potential, worked with Sarah to create a formal program. They called it the Max Memorial Foundation, dedicated to identifying and training children with unusual animal communication abilities for search and rescue work. The program started small, just Tommy working with 2 or 3 kids via video calls, but word spread, and soon they were receiving inquiries from all over the country. Children who had been labeled as imaginative, delusional, or attention-seeking were finding out that they had a real gift, one that could save lives. Zeus thrived in his role as a demonstration dog, showing the other children through Tommy what was possible when the connection between human and animal was properly developed. He was patient with the new dogs, teaching them as Max had taught him, passing on a legacy of service and dedication. One day, a package arrived at their house with no return address. Inside was a collar, old and worn, with a note that read, "This belonged to Scout, who taught Max, who taught Zeus." The line continues. Tommy held the collar reverently, and Zeus sniffed it with great interest. "It smells like history," Tommy said softly. "Like all the dogs who came before, all the lives they saved." Sarah watched her son carefully place the collar in a special box where they kept Max's collar and other mementos from their searches. He was 8 years old now, but sometimes she saw in him the man he would become, compassionate, dedicated, and gifted with an ability that would touch countless lives. The phone rang, breaking her reverie. Another search, another missing person who needed their help. Tommy was already getting Zeus's working vest, the young dog dancing with excitement at the prospect of doing what he was born to do. As they prepared to leave, Tommy paused at the window that looked out at Max's grave under the oak tree. "We're going to work now, Max," he said quietly. "We'll make you proud." Zeus barked once, and Sarah could have sworn she heard an answering bark on the wind, distant but clear, a guardian's voice carrying across the bridge between worlds, reminding them that love and purpose transcend even death. The search they were called to that day would become one of their most challenging yet. An elderly man with Alzheimer's had wandered from his care facility during a shift change. He had been missing for 6 hours in an area that bordered both dense forest and a busy highway. The family was distraught, knowing that he wouldn't remember his name or address if someone found him. When they arrived at the scene, Tommy immediately sensed something different. Zeus was agitated, pacing and whining in a way that was unusual for him. Tommy knelt beside the dog, his hand on Zeus's head, and his face went pale. "Mom," he said quietly, "Zeus says there's danger. Not just for the man, but for us too." Chief Patterson, who was coordinating the search, overheard. "What kind of danger?" Tommy closed his eyes, concentrating. "There's someone else in the woods. Someone who doesn't want to be found. Zeus can smell fear and something else. Something bad." The search area had recently been in the news for a series of break-ins at remote cabins. Police suspected a fugitive was hiding in the woods, but they hadn't been able to locate him. Now, it seemed the missing elderly man might have inadvertently wandered into dangerous territory. "We're calling in additional units," Chief Patterson decided. "Armed backup. Tommy, can Zeus track the elderly man without getting close to the other person?" Tommy consulted with Zeus again, their silent communication lasting several long moments. "Zeus says the old man is moving away from the bad person, but he's heading toward the highway. We need to find him first." They set out with a larger team than usual, including 2 armed officers. Zeus led them through increasingly difficult terrain, his nose working constantly. Tommy had to be carried part of the way by Officer Jake, the undergrowth too thick for his small legs to navigate quickly. After an hour of searching, Zeus suddenly froze, his hackles raised. A low growl rumbled from his chest, and he positioned himself protectively in front of Tommy. "He's here," Tommy whispered. "The bad man. He's watching us." The officers immediately went on alert, hands on their weapons, scanning the dense forest around them. For several tense moments, nothing moved. Then, from about 30 yards away, they heard branches breaking as someone fled deeper into the woods. "Let them go," Chief Patterson ordered. "Our priority is the missing man." Zeus relaxed slightly but remained vigilant as they continued the search. 20 minutes later, he picked up the trail again, stronger this time. The elderly man's path was erratic, circling back on itself multiple times, typical of someone with dementia who had become disoriented. They found him sitting by a small stream, talking animatedly to himself about a fishing trip from 50 years ago. He was cold, confused, and had several scratches from walking through brambles, but he was otherwise unharmed. "Hello, sir," Tommy said gently, approaching slowly so as not to startle him. "We're here to take you home." The man looked at Tommy with confusion that slowly morphed into a smile. "Are you my grandson? You look like my grandson." "Sure," Tommy said, taking the man's weathered hand. "Let's go home, Grandpa." As they were leading the man back to safety, Zeus suddenly spun around, barking ferociously. A figure burst from the bushes, the fugitive, wild-eyed and desperate, a knife in his hand. He lunged not at the officers but at Tommy, perhaps thinking a child would be an easy hostage. Zeus moved faster than Sarah had ever seen him move. The young dog launched himself at the attacker, his jaws clamping down on the man's knife arm. The fugitive screamed and dropped the weapon, falling to the ground with Zeus on top of him, the dog's training taking over, as he held the man down without causing serious injury. The officers quickly subdued and arrested the fugitive, who turned out to be wanted for multiple violent crimes. Zeus released his hold only when Officer Jake gave the command, then immediately returned to Tommy's side, checking the boy for any harm. "Zeus saved my life," Tommy said, his voice shaking with delayed fear. He wrapped his arms around the dog's neck, burying his face in the thick fur. "He moved so fast, Mom. I didn't even see him until he was already there." That night, as the adrenaline wore off and the reality of what had happened sank in, Sarah found Tommy sitting in his room with Zeus, both of them quiet and subdued. "Are you okay, baby?" she asked, sitting on his bed. Tommy nodded, but his eyes were troubled. "Zeus showed me something today. When that man came at me, Zeus didn't think, he just acted. He would have died to protect me." He looked up at his mother with tears in his eyes. "Just like Max would have." Sarah pulled him into a hug. "That's what love looks like, Tommy. That's what family does for each other." "I used to think my gift was just about understanding animals," Tommy said softly. "But it's more than that, isn't it? It's about the connection between all living things, about how we're all linked together. Max knew that. He tried to show me, and now Zeus understands it too." The incident with the fugitive brought new attention to their work. The story of a search dog saving a child from an armed attacker while also finding a missing elderly man made headlines across the country. The Max Memorial Foundation received a surge of applications from families with gifted children, and donations poured in from people moved by their story. With the additional resources, they were able to expand the program significantly. They brought in professional trainers, child psychologists who specialized in unusual abilities, and even researchers interested in studying the human-animal connection that these children exhibited. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, no relation to Emma's family, from the University of California, came to study Tommy and Zeus. She brought sophisticated equipment to measure brainwaves, electromagnetic fields, and other phenomena during their communication sessions. "What I'm seeing is unprecedented," she told Sarah after a week of observation. "When Tommy and Zeus connect, their brainwaves actually synchronize. They're operating on the same frequency, literally. It's as if they share a consciousness for those moments." She showed Sarah printouts of the brainwave patterns. "Look here, this is Tommy's pattern when he's communicating with Zeus. And this is Zeus's pattern at the same moment. They're nearly identical. I've never seen anything like it in 30 years of research." Tommy, who had been listening, spoke up. "It's not just Zeus and me. All the kids in the program can do it to some degree. We're all connected, like drops of water in the same ocean. Max showed me that before he died. He said it's always been this way, but most people have forgotten how to feel it." Dr. Chen was fascinated. "Tommy, would you be willing to work with me to study this further? Not as a lab subject, but as a partner in research? You understand this from the inside in a way I never could?" Tommy looked at his mother, then at Zeus, who was watching the conversation with his usual intelligent attention. "Only if it helps other kids like me," he said, "and only if Zeus agrees." The dog's tail wagged, which everyone took as a yes. The research partnership proved fruitful. Working with Dr. Chen, Tommy helped develop protocols for testing and training children with animal communication gifts. They discovered that the ability often emerged after a traumatic event involving an animal, like Tommy's near drowning and rescue by a dog, but could also be present from birth in some children. They also found that certain dog breeds were more likely to form these deep connections, with German Shepherds, Border Collies, and Golden Retrievers showing the strongest aptitude. But the most important factor was the individual dog's personality and training. As Tommy grew older, his abilities evolved. By age 9, he could sense not just what Zeus was thinking, but could pick up impressions from other animals as well. Birds would show him aerial views of missing hikers. Cats would reveal hidden spaces where children might hide. Even wild animals sometimes contributed to searches, though their communication was more primitive and harder to interpret. One particularly memorable search involved a missing 5-year-old who had wandered into a nature preserve. Traditional search methods had failed, and even Zeus was having trouble tracking the child's scent due to recent heavy rains. Tommy was sitting on a log, frustrated and worried, when a crow landed nearby. The bird cocked its head at him, and Tommy felt a faint tickle in his mind, like a whisper too quiet to hear clearly. "Zeus," Tommy said slowly, "I think the crow knows something." Zeus approached the crow carefully, the two animals regarding each other with mutual respect. Tommy placed one hand on Zeus and reached out slowly toward the crow, not touching it, but holding his hand a few inches away. The images that flooded his mind were fragmented and strange. The world from above, a flash of bright red, the child's jacket, a hollow tree, the glint of water. It was like looking through a kaleidoscope, but Tommy had learned to piece together these fragments. "The crow saw her this morning," Tommy told the search team. "She's near water, hiding in a hollow tree. She's scared of the helicopters. That's why she won't come out when people call." Following the crow's guidance translated through Tommy and confirmed by Zeus's nose, they found the little girl exactly where Tommy had described, curled up in a hollow tree trunk near a small pond, too frightened to respond to the searchers' calls. The rescue of the little girl from the hollow tree marked a turning point in how the search and rescue community viewed Tommy's abilities. No longer was he just a gifted child with an unusual connection to dogs. He was becoming something more, a bridge between the human and animal worlds that could access information no one else could reach. As winter approached, Tommy noticed Zeus acting strangely. The dog would sit at the window for hours, staring out at something only he could see. Sometimes he would whine softly, his tail wagging as if greeting an invisible friend. "He's seeing Max," Tommy told his mother one snowy evening. "Max visits him in the quiet moments, teaching him things I can't understand yet." Sarah had learned to accept these statements without question. Too much had happened. Too many impossible things had proven true for her to doubt her son's insights anymore. That winter brought one of the worst blizzards the region had seen in decades. 3 feet of snow fell in less than 24 hours, with winds that created drifts tall enough to bury cars. In the midst of this chaos, a call came that would test everything Tommy and Zeus had learned. A small private plane had gone down in the mountains. The pilot had managed to send a distress signal before crash landing, but the coordinates were uncertain, and the weather made aerial search impossible. There were 4 people on board, including a pregnant woman who was 8 months along. "We can't send teams up there until the storm passes," Chief Patterson told Sarah when she called. "It's too dangerous." But by then, she didn't need to finish. By then, it would likely be too late. Tommy was listening to the conversation, his hand on Zeus's head. "We have to go," he said quietly. "The pregnant lady needs help now. Her baby is coming." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Tommy, we can't go up a mountain in a blizzard. It's impossible." But Tommy had that look in his eyes, the one that meant he was receiving information from somewhere beyond normal perception. "Max says there's a way. He knows those mountains. He used to train there with his first handler before the Chens. He can show Zeus the safe paths." It was insane. It was dangerous. It was probably impossible. But Sarah had seen her son do impossible things before, and she knew that look in his eyes. Lives hung in the balance, and Tommy would never forgive himself if he didn't try. "I'm going with you," she said firmly. No arguments. Chief Patterson tried to talk them out of it, but when Tommy explained that Max was somehow guiding them, she reluctantly agreed to let them try. "But you take a full team with you," she insisted, and the moment it becomes too dangerous, you turn back. The team assembled quickly. Officer Jake, 2 experienced mountain rescue specialists, a paramedic, and, surprisingly, Dr. Chen, the researcher who had been studying Tommy's abilities. "If we're going to ask you to do something this dangerous," she said, "the least I can do is document it and help however I can." They set out in specialized snow vehicles, but after only a mile up the mountain road, the vehicles could go no further. The snow was too deep, the wind too strong. They would have to continue on foot with snowshoes. Zeus took the lead, but his movement was different than usual. He would take a few steps, then pause, his head tilted as if listening to something. Then he would adjust his direction slightly and continue. Tommy, struggling through the deep snow, even with adult help, kept his hand on Zeus when he could, maintaining their connection. "Max is showing him the old ranger trails," Tommy explained, breathing hard from the exertion. "Paths that aren't on any map. He says we need to hurry. The pregnant woman is in labor." The wind howled around them, visibility dropping to mere feet. Several times, the rescue specialists wanted to turn back, but Zeus kept finding shelter just when they needed it. A cave here, a cluster of protective trees there. It was as if he had a map in his head of every safe spot on the mountain. After 3 hours of grueling travel, Zeus suddenly stopped and began barking urgently. Through the blinding snow, they could barely make out a dark shape. The crashed plane, its nose buried in a snowbank, one wing torn completely off. The team rushed forward, and Officer Jake forced open the crumpled door. Inside, they found the 4 passengers huddled together for warmth. The pilot had a broken leg, one passenger was unconscious with a head injury, and in the back, the pregnant woman was clearly in active labor, her husband holding her hand and looking terrified. "Thank God," the husband gasped when he saw them. "She's been in labor for 2 hours. The baby's coming now." Sarah's medical training kicked in immediately. She might be just a nurse, but she had assisted in emergency deliveries before. "Get her into the most stable position possible," she ordered. "We need blankets, hot water if we can manage it, and clean cloth." While Sarah and the paramedic attended to the woman, Tommy and Zeus circled the crash site. The dog was agitated, pacing and whining, his attention focused on something beyond the plane. "What is it, boy?" Tommy asked, placing his hand on Zeus's head. The images that flooded his mind made him gasp. "Officer Jake! There's another survivor. Someone was thrown from the plane. Zeus can smell them." Despite the ongoing medical emergency, Jake and one of the mountain specialists followed Zeus into the storm. The dog led them about 50 yards from the plane to a deep drift. Buried beneath the snow, unconscious but miraculously alive, was a 5th passenger. A teenage boy no one had known was on the flight. They brought him back to the plane just as the pregnant woman's screams announced the baby's imminent arrival. In the cramped, cold confines of the crashed aircraft, with a blizzard raging outside, Sarah delivered a healthy baby girl. The moment the baby cried, something extraordinary happened. Zeus, who had been standing guard at the door, suddenly howled, a long, mournful, beautiful sound that seemed to pierce through the storm. And from somewhere in the distance, impossibly, came an answering howl. "Max," Tommy whispered, tears in his eyes. "He's celebrating the new life." The rescue team worked through the night to stabilize all the patients. The teenager Zeus had found had a broken arm and hypothermia, but would survive. The unconscious passenger regained awareness, though he clearly had a concussion. The pilot's leg was splinted, and the new mother and baby were wrapped in every warm thing they could find. But they still faced a problem: how to get everyone off the mountain. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and they couldn't carry all the injured people back the way they had come. Tommy sat with Zeus, both of them still and quiet, communicating in their unique way. After several minutes, Tommy opened his eyes with new determination. "There's an old ranger station about a half-mile east," he said. "Max says it's still standing, and it has a radio tower. We might be able to call for help from there when the storm breaks." The mountain specialists were skeptical. "There's no ranger station on our maps in that direction. It was decommissioned 15 years ago," Tommy insisted. "Max remembers it from his early training. He says the structure is solid stone, and it'll protect us better than this plane." With no better options, they decided to trust the boy and his remarkable dog. Moving the injured was a monumental task. They fashioned stretchers from plane seats and cargo netting, taking turns carrying the wounded through the deep snow. Zeus led the way, that same strange certainty in his movements, as if following a path only he could see. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes, a dark shape loomed out of the storm. A small stone building with a metal roof, nearly buried in snow, but still standing strong. The ranger station, exactly where Tommy had said it would be. They broke through the boarded-up door to find a dusty but intact shelter. There was even an old wood-burning stove that, miraculously, still worked. Within an hour they had a fire going, and the injured were warm and stable. The radio equipment was long dead, but Dr. Chen had an idea. "Tommy," she said, "you can communicate with Zeus, and Zeus seems to be able to sense things over great distances. Is there any way you could send a message through him to other dogs? Get them to alert their owners that we need help?" It sounded crazy, but everything about their situation was already beyond normal belief. Tommy sat with Zeus by the window, both of them focused and still. The boy's face showed intense concentration, and Zeus began to whine and bark in a specific pattern. 3 short barks, 3 long, 3 short again. "SOS," Officer Jake recognized. "He's barking SOS." For long minutes, nothing happened. Then, faintly through the storm, they heard it, answering barks from multiple directions. Dogs throughout the mountain communities were responding, picking up Zeus's message and passing it along. "It's working," Tommy said, his voice strained from the effort. "The dogs are telling their people. Someone's calling for help." Sure enough, within 2 hours, they heard the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors. The storm had created a brief break, just enough for a rescue helicopter to reach them. One by one, the injured were airlifted to safety, with Tommy, Sarah, and Zeus on the last flight out. As the helicopter lifted off, Tommy looked back at the ranger station, now barely visible through the snow. For just a moment, he could have sworn he saw a German shepherd sitting in the doorway, watching them leave with approval in his ghostly eyes. The rescue made international news. A boy who could talk to animals, guided by the spirit of a dead dog, saving lives in an impossible blizzard. It was the kind of story that captured imaginations around the world. But for Tommy, the fame was less important than what happened next. Letters began arriving from everywhere. Parents of children with similar abilities, asking for help. Scientists wanting to study the phenomenon. Most importantly, reports of other human-animal pairs who were performing extraordinary rescues in their own communities. There was Maria in Brazil, who worked with a street dog to find missing children in the favelas. Yuki in Japan, whose connection with her Akita had saved dozens from avalanches. Samuel in Kenya, who could communicate with wild elephants to prevent human-wildlife conflicts. "We're not alone," Tommy told his mother one evening, reading through the letters. "There are others like me all over the world. Max knew this would happen. He said I was just the beginning, with the help of doctors." Chen and Chief Patterson, they organized the first international conference on human-animal communication for search and rescue. It was held that summer, bringing together 50 children from 30 countries, each with their own remarkable animal partner. Tommy, now 10 years old, found himself in the position of elder statesman to this unique group. He and Zeus demonstrated their techniques, shared their experiences, and most importantly, helped the other children understand that their gift was not a burden, but a blessing. One girl, Anya from Russia, was particularly struggling. She could communicate with her wolf-dog hybrid, but the intensity of the connection frightened her. She could feel everything the dog felt, including pain and fear, and it was overwhelming. Tommy spent hours with her, teaching her the meditation techniques he had learned to manage the flow of information. "You have to be like a river," he explained. "Let the feelings flow through you without trying to hold on to them. And remember, your dog is sharing these things because he trusts you. It's an honor, not a burden." By the end of the conference, Anya was smiling, her wolf dog calm beside her, as she successfully demonstrated finding a hidden object using their connection. The conference led to the creation of an international network, sharing resources and techniques across borders. They developed training protocols, safety standards, and most importantly, a support system for children who might otherwise feel isolated by their unusual abilities. As Tommy grew older, his role evolved from active searcher to teacher and mentor. By age 12, he was conducting training sessions via video link with children around the world. Zeus, now fully mature and in his prime, was the perfect demonstration partner, patient with newcomers and skilled enough to show the full potential of the human-animal bond. but it was a local case that would prove to be one of their most significant. A school bus full of special needs children had disappeared during a field trip. The bus had left the museum they were visiting, but never arrived back at school. 3 hours had passed with no word, and parents were beginning to panic. The police suspected the driver might have had a medical emergency, but with no GPS on the older bus and no response to radio calls, they had no idea where to start looking. The route between the museum and school was 20 miles of rural roads with dozens of possible detours. Tommy and Zeus arrived at the command post to find chaos. Parents were crying, police were coordinating search grids, and volunteers were gathering to help. But something felt different about this case to Tommy. "Zeus isn't picking up a scent trail," he told Chief Patterson. "It's like the bus never left the museum parking lot." Patterson frowned. "We have witnesses who saw it leave." Tommy closed his eyes, his hand on Zeus's head. The dog was showing him something, but it was fragmented and confusing. Images of the bus, but also darkness, echoes, the sound of dripping water. "They're underground," Tommy said suddenly. "The bus is underground somewhere." It seemed impossible, but they had learned to trust Tommy's insights. A quick investigation revealed that the museum was built over an old limestone quarry with an extensive cave system. Some of the old quarry roads had been incorporated into the museum's service areas. Racing back to the museum, they found what they were looking for: tire tracks leading to a service road that descended into what looked like a loading area, but was actually an entrance to the old quarry. The bus driver, confused and disoriented from a mild stroke, had taken a wrong turn and driven into the cave system. The bus had gotten stuck when the ceiling became too low, trapping them underground where radio signals couldn't reach. Zeus led them through the dark passages, his bark echoing off the stone walls. They found the bus a quarter-mile in, the children scared but unharmed, singing songs their teacher had started to keep them calm. The driver was conscious but clearly needed medical attention. The rescue was complicated. They had to back the bus out carefully, inches at a time, with spotters making sure they didn't hit the cave walls. But within 2 hours, all 23 children were safely reunited with their parents. One of those children was Emma Chen, the same girl Tommy and Max had saved from the drainage tunnel years ago. Now, 11 years old, she ran to Tommy and hugged him tightly. "I knew you'd find us," she said. "I told everyone Tommy and Zeus would come. You always do." That night, as Sarah tucked Tommy into bed, though at 12 he insisted he was too old for tucking in, she found him looking at a photo of Max on his nightstand. "Do you miss him?" she asked. "Every day," Tommy admitted, "but I also feel him every day. In Zeus, in the work we do, in the other dogs we've trained. Max isn't gone, Mom. He just changed form." Sarah kissed his forehead. "You've grown so wise. Sometimes I forget you're still just a kid." "I had good teachers," Tommy said, smiling. "You, Max, Zeus, and all the people we've helped. They all taught me something." The next few years brought continued growth for the Max Memorial Foundation. They established training centers on 3 continents, developed a certification program for human-animal search teams, and successfully lobbied for official recognition of animal-assisted search and rescue in several countries. Tommy, now 15, had grown tall and lanky, his voice deepening, but his gift as strong as ever. Zeus, at 7 years old, was at the peak of his abilities, their partnership so refined that they barely needed physical contact anymore to communicate. It was during this time that they faced their most challenging case yet. A massive earthquake had struck a coastal city, toppling buildings and trapping hundreds of people in the rubble. International rescue teams were converging on the site, and Tommy and Zeus were specifically requested. The devastation was unlike anything Tommy had ever seen. Entire blocks were reduced to rubble, the air thick with dust and the sound of sirens. Rescue dogs from around the world were working tirelessly. But the scale of the disaster was overwhelming. Zeus worked for 18 hours straight the first day, locating 7 survivors in the rubble. But it was what happened on the second day that would stay with Tommy forever. They were searching a collapsed apartment building when Zeus suddenly stopped, his whole body rigid. Tommy felt it immediately. Not just one life under the rubble, but many. An entire daycare center in the building's basement had been protected by a reinforced play area, creating a pocket where 14 children and 3 teachers were trapped but alive. The rescue took 12 hours, Engineers had to shore up the unstable rubble while carefully creating an access tunnel. Tommy stayed on site the entire time, using his connection with Zeus to relay information about the survivors' condition to the rescue teams. "The teacher says the air is getting thin," he would report, Zeus picking up the scent changes that indicated dropping oxygen levels. "They're moving the children to the far corner where there's better airflow." When the first child was brought out alive, the crowd erupted in cheers. One by one, all 17 survivors were extracted, dehydrated and scared, but alive. It was called the miracle of the earthquake, and Tommy and Zeus were hailed as heroes. But for Tommy, the real moment of significance came later, when one of the rescued teachers approached him. "I could feel your dog," she said, tears in her eyes. "When we were trapped, I could feel him above us, and somehow I knew we would be saved. It was like he was sending us hope through the concrete." Tommy understood then that the connection he shared with Zeus went beyond just communication. They were conduits for something larger: hope, love, the unbreakable bond between all living things that manifests most clearly in moments of crisis. As Tommy prepared to graduate high school, colleges from around the world offered him scholarships to study everything from veterinary medicine to neuroscience. But Tommy had a different plan. "I want to start a school," he told his mother. "Not a regular school, but a place where kids with the gift can come to learn how to use it properly, where they can train with their animals in a safe environment, where they won't be treated as oddities, but as the special people they are." Sarah, now in her 40s but still his biggest supporter, smiled. "That sounds like exactly what the world needs." With the help of the Max Memorial Foundation's board, they purchased a large property in the mountains, ironically not far from where they had rescued the plane crash survivors years before. The Max and Zeus Academy for Human-Animal Communication opened its doors on what would have been Max's 15th birthday. The first class had 12 students from 8 countries, ranging in age from 7 to 16. Each came with their animal partner, dogs mostly, but also a cat, a horse, and surprisingly, a raven whose human partner was a boy from Norway who had been saved from an avalanche by the bird's warning. Tommy, though only 18, was their primary instructor, with Zeus as his co-teacher. Together, they taught not just the techniques of search and rescue, but the philosophy behind their gift. "We are bridges," Tommy told his students on their first day. "Bridges between the human and animal worlds, between the lost and the found, between despair and hope. What we do isn't magic. It's remembering something humans have forgotten, that we are all connected." One of his students, a shy girl named Rosie with a golden retriever named Sunshine, raised her hand. "Mr. Tommy, what happens when our animals, when they die? Do we lose our gift?" Tommy smiled gently, remembering his own fear when Max had passed. "Come here, Sunshine," he called, and the golden retriever trotted over. Tommy placed his hand on the dog's head and closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened them with tears glistening. "Sunshine just showed me something," he said. "She can feel Max here, watching over this place. Our animals don't really leave us, Rosie. They become part of the network, the invisible web that connects all of us. When Sunshine's time comes, many, many years from now, she'll join that network, and you'll find another partner who carries her spirit forward." Zeus barked once, as if in agreement, and all the animals in the room seemed to relax, sensing the truth in Tommy's words. The academy grew quickly, adding distance learning programs for those who couldn't attend in person, developing new training techniques, and even partnering with universities to study the scientific basis for human-animal communication. Dr. Chen, who had become like an aunt to Tommy, established a research lab on the grounds. Her studies had shown that people with the gift had subtle differences in their brain structure, enhanced areas dealing with empathy and nonverbal communication. But whether these differences were the cause of the gift or the result of it remained a mystery. One autumn day, when Tommy was 20 and Zeus was 9, they received an unusual request. A tech billionaire's daughter had gone missing, but not in the traditional sense. She had run away, leaving a note saying she needed to find herself, and had been spotted heading into the vast wilderness of Alaska. The billionaire had hired traditional search teams, private investigators, even satellite imaging companies, but his daughter seemed to have vanished into the wild. In desperation, he reached out to the academy. "She's not really lost," Tommy explained after reviewing the case. "She doesn't want to be found. That makes it much harder, But the father was insistent, worried that his daughter, who had no wilderness experience, would die in the harsh Alaskan winter that was fast approaching. Against his better judgment, Tommy agreed to try. He and Zeus flew to Alaska with a small team, including Lily, the girl he had first mentored years ago, now a skilled tracker in her own right with her dog Buddy. The search area was massive, thousands of square miles of wilderness that could swallow a person without a trace. For 3 days, they found nothing. Even Zeus seemed frustrated, unable to lock onto a scent trail that led anywhere productive. Then, on the 4th day, something unexpected happened. A wolf appeared at the edge of their camp. Everyone froze. Wolves typically avoided humans, and a lone wolf approaching a camp was unusual and potentially dangerous. But Zeus didn't bark or growl. Instead, he and the wolf regarded each other with what looked like mutual respect. Tommy slowly approached, his hand extended, but not touching the wild animal. The wolf's eyes met his, and for a moment, Tommy felt a connection different from anything he had experienced before. It wasn't clear like with Zeus, but more like looking through frosted glass. Shapes and impressions rather than clear images. "She helped you," Tommy said softly to the wolf. "The missing girl. She helped your pack somehow." The wolf turned and began walking away, looking back once as if to say, "Follow." Tommy looked at his team. "We go where he leads," he said simply. For 2 days, they followed the wolf through terrain that no search team had covered. The wolf would appear, lead them for a few hours, then disappear, only to reappear when they needed direction. Zeus seemed to understand this arrangement, acting as an intermediary between the wild wolf and the humans. Finally, the wolf led them to a small valley hidden between 2 ridges. There, in a skillfully built shelter made from branches and moss, they found the billionaire's daughter, Andrea. She was thin but healthy, having learned to forage and hunt with surprising skill. But she wasn't alone. Curled up beside her was a wolf pup, its legs splinted with sticks and cloth. "I'm not going back," were Andrea's first words. "Not until he's healed." The story came out slowly. Andrea had indeed run away, overwhelmed by the pressure of her father's expectations and the artificiality of her high society life. She had wandered into the wilderness with vague romantic notions of living off the land, nearly dying in the first week. It was the wolf pack that had saved her. They had found her collapsed by a stream and, instead of seeing her as prey, had recognized her as a fellow creature in distress. They had led her to shelter, even brought her small game until she learned to find food herself. In return, when she found the injured pup, abandoned by the pack because he couldn't keep up, she had used her pre-med training to set his broken leg and nurse him back to health. "They accepted me," Andrea said, tears streaming down her face. "Not because of my father's money or my family name, but just because I showed kindness to one of their own." Tommy understood. He had spent his life bridging the human and animal worlds, but Andrea had gone further. She had actually crossed over, been accepted into a wild pack as one of their own. "Your father is worried sick," Lily said gently. "He just wants to know you're safe." Andrea looked at the wolf pup, then at the adult wolf still watching from the ridge. "I'll come back," she said finally, "but only if Ash comes with me." She indicated the pup. "And only if I can return here sometimes, to check on the pack." It took some negotiation, but eventually a compromise was reached. Andrea would return to civilization, but would work with a wolf conservation organization, splitting her time between the city and the wilderness. The wolf pup, which technically shouldn't be kept as a pet, would be placed in a special rehabilitation program that Andrea would oversee. As they prepared to leave, the adult wolf approached Tommy one last time. The animal touched its nose to Tommy's hand, and in that moment, Tommy felt the full weight of the wild, ancient, free, and utterly unlike anything in the human world, yet somehow familiar. "Thank you," Tommy whispered, though he knew the wolf needed no thanks. It had simply done what was right, what the connection between all living things demanded. The flight back was quiet, each person lost in their own thoughts about what they had witnessed. Andrea sat with Ash, the wolf pup, in her lap, while Zeus rested his head on Tommy's knee, both animals peaceful in the droning of the plane's engines. "You know what this means," Lily said to Tommy quietly. "If humans can connect with wild animals, not just domestic ones, then the network is bigger than we ever imagined." Tommy nodded. "Max knew. He tried to show me, but I wasn't ready to understand. We're all connected. Humans, domestic animals, wild animals, maybe even plants and the earth itself. The gift isn't just about search and rescue. It's about remembering our place in the web of life. When they returned to the academy, Tommy found a package waiting for him with no return address. Inside was a very old leather journal, its pages yellow with age. The first entry was dated 1892, and it told the story of a man who could speak with horses, who used his gift to find lost children in the Old West. Each entry was from a different person, in different handwriting, spanning over a century. All told similar stories, humans with the ability to communicate with animals, using their gift to help others. The last entry was in handwriting Tommy recognized. It was from Henry Walker, Max's original owner. "The gift has always existed," Henry had written, "passed not by blood, but by spirit, from one generation to the next. Max will find the next keeper, as Scout found me." The line continues. Tommy understood then that he wasn't just teaching a new skill, he was maintaining an ancient tradition, one that stretched back to the very beginning of the human-animal relationship. As Zeus aged, Tommy began looking for the next dog in the line. He found her at a shelter, a German Shepherd mix with one blue eye and one brown, who had been labeled unadoptable due to her extreme sensitivity to human emotions. "That's not a flaw," Tommy told the shelter worker. "That's exactly what we're looking for." He named her Hope. Zeus took to training Hope with the same patience Max had shown with him. The young dog was eager but easily overwhelmed, often needing to retreat to a quiet space when the emotions around her became too intense. "She's like the new generation of children coming to the academy," Tommy observed to his mother one evening. "More sensitive than ever, more connected, but also more vulnerable. We need to teach them to shield themselves while staying open." Sarah, now with gray streaking through her hair but still vibrant, smiled at her son. "You've become quite the philosopher." "I had good teachers," Tommy replied, watching Zeus gently correct Hope's tracking technique in the yard. When Tommy was 22, Zeus began to slow down. Not dramatically, but Tommy could feel it in their connection, a tiredness that went deeper than physical fatigue. The great dog had given everything to his work, and his body was beginning to pay the price. "One more big search," Zeus seemed to tell him one morning, his brown eyes still bright despite the gray creeping around his muzzle. "One more that matters." That search came sooner than expected. A Category 5 hurricane had devastated a coastal region, and entire communities were cut off from rescue efforts. The Academy mobilized every available team, with Tommy and Zeus leading the effort despite Sarah's concerns about Zeus's health. The devastation was apocalyptic. Entire towns had been erased, replaced by fields of debris and flooding. The smell of death was everywhere, and even experienced rescue workers were overwhelmed by the scale of the disaster. Zeus worked like he was young again, his nose finding survivor after survivor in the rubble. But Tommy could feel the cost. Each find drained the dog a little more, each hour taking a toll that wouldn't be recovered. On the third day, Zeus alerted to a collapsed school. The building had been evacuated before the storm, but Zeus was insistent. There were people inside. Rescue workers dug for hours before finding them, a janitor and 5 homeless individuals who had sought shelter in the basement, not knowing the evacuation order had been given. All 6 were alive, though badly dehydrated. As the last one was pulled from the rubble, Zeus collapsed. Tommy was beside him instantly, cradling the dog's massive head in his lap. Zeus's breathing was labored, his heartbeat irregular. The veterinary team rushed over, but Tommy already knew what they would say. "He gave everything," the vet said softly. "His heart is failing. We can make him comfortable, but..." Tommy nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Bring Hope," he said quietly. The young dog approached tentatively, sensing the gravity of the moment. Zeus lifted his head with enormous effort and touched noses with Hope. Tommy felt the moment of transfer, not just knowledge or training, but something deeper. The essence of what made Zeus special, what connected him to Max and all the dogs before, passed to Hope in that gentle touch. Zeus looked at Tommy one last time, his eyes full of love and accomplishment. He had done his job, fulfilled his purpose, and passed on the legacy. With a final, contented sigh, the great dog closed his eyes and was still. The entire rescue site went quiet. Hardened rescue workers, who had seen death and devastation beyond measure, stood with heads bowed as word spread that Zeus had passed. Someone started singing Amazing Grace, and soon hundreds of voices joined in, honoring a dog who had saved so many lives. They flew Zeus's body back to the academy, where he was buried next to the memorial they had created for Max. The funeral drew people from around the world, families Zeus had helped, fellow search teams, researchers who had studied him, and children whose lives had been touched by his gentle spirit. Emma Chen, now a young woman studying veterinary medicine, gave a eulogy that left no dry eyes. Zeus taught us that love doesn't need words, that connection transcends species, and that purpose gives life meaning. He was more than a search dog. He was a teacher, a friend, and a bridge between worlds. Tommy stood with Hope beside him, the young dog pressed against his leg as if trying to offer comfort. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Tommy felt a familiar presence. Not just Zeus, not just Max, but all of them. All the dogs who had carried this gift through generations, all standing watch, ensuring the line would continue. "We'll make you proud," Tommy whispered to the wind. Hope barked once softly, and Tommy knew she felt it too, the weight and honor of the legacy she now carried. The academy continued to grow. By the time Tommy was 25, they had trained over 300 human-animal teams, saved thousands of lives, and fundamentally changed how the world viewed the relationship between humans and animals. Hope proved to be different from both Max and Zeus, more intuitive, able to sense not just physical location, but emotional states with unprecedented accuracy. She could tell if a missing person was suicidal versus simply lost, if a child was running from abuse or just acting out. This additional layer of information made their searches even more effective. One case in particular showcased Hope's unique abilities. A teenager with autism had disappeared from his group home, and traditional search methods had failed. The boy was nonverbal and had a history of self-harm when stressed. Hope led them not to where the boy was, but to where he was going, a bridge known for suicides. They arrived just as the boy was climbing the railing, and it was Hope who approached him, not threatening, not aggressive, just present. She lay down at his feet and refused to move until he climbed back down. Later, through Tommy's connection with Hope, they learned that the dog had sensed the boy's desperation and had essentially projected calm and acceptance to him, breaking through his panic in a way no human could have. "She's an emotional support dog and a search dog combined," Tommy explained to his students, "the next evolution of what we do." As Tommy approached 30, he had become a world-renowned expert in human-animal communication. He had written books, given lectures at universities, and consulted with search and rescue organizations globally. But he never forgot that his gift had started with a scared 5-year-old boy and a crying German shepherd on a bridge. One foggy morning, remarkably similar to that day 25 years earlier, Tommy stood on the same bridge with Hope. They weren't on a search. Tommy just sometimes came here to remember, to honor where it all began. A woman approached with a young boy, maybe 4 years old. The child broke free from his mother's hand and ran to Hope, throwing his arms around the dog's neck without fear. "I'm so sorry," the mother apologized, trying to pull her son back. "Jason, you can't just run up to strange dogs." But Hope was gently licking the boy's face, her tail wagging, and Tommy saw something in the child's eyes he recognized. "It's okay," Tommy said to the mother. "Hope likes kids. Actually," he paused, watching the boy whisper something to Hope, who tilted her head as if listening. "Has Jason ever shown any unusual connection with animals?" The mother's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "He's always talking to our cat, claiming she tells him things. The pediatrician says it's just imagination, but sometimes the things he knows..." Tommy smiled and pulled out a card for the academy. "It's not imagination. Your son has a gift. When you're ready, give us a call. We can help him understand and develop it safely." As the mother and child walked away, Jason turned back and waved. "Hope says thank you for helping kids like me," he called out, then laughed as his mother looked stunned. Tommy watched them disappear into the fog, then looked down at Hope. "The line continues," he said softly. Hope barked once in agreement, and together they walked back along the bridge, two silhouettes in the mist, carrying forward a legacy that had started with tears and ended with hope. Years passed, and the academy became a global institution. Tommy, now director, oversaw programs on every continent. Hope had puppies, carefully selected homes where children with the gift were waiting for their partners. The network grew stronger, the connections deeper. On his 40th birthday, Tommy stood in the Academy's main hall, surrounded by hundreds of students, graduates, and their animal partners. The walls were covered with photos: Max, Zeus, Hope, and dozens of other animals who had served in the program. Below each photo were numbers: lives saved, families reunited, disasters averted. When I was 5 years old, Tommy told the assembled crowd, I met a dog named Max who was crying on a bridge. I didn't know then that he would change not just my life, but the lives of thousands. I didn't know that the gift he helped me discover would spread around the world, creating a network of bridges between the human and animal worlds. He paused, his hand resting on Hope's head. She was older now, gray creeping into her muzzle, but still strong, still connected. Each of you carries this gift forward. Each rescue you perform, each life you save, each connection you make strengthens the web that connects all living things. You are not just search and rescue teams. You are the living proof that humans and animals are meant to work together, that our separation from nature is an illusion, and that love and understanding can transcend any barrier. The room erupted in applause, but Tommy wasn't finished. He held up an old leather journal, the one that had documented the gift through generations. Tonight, I add my entry to this journal, and then I pass it on to the next keeper. The gift doesn't belong to any one person. It belongs to all of us, to everyone who has ever felt that connection with an animal and wondered if it was real. He opened the journal and read what he had written. The gift is not rare. It is simply forgotten. Every child is born with the ability to connect, to understand, to bridge worlds. Some of us are lucky enough to have that ability awakened by trauma, by necessity, or by a crying dog on a bridge. But it lives in everyone, waiting to be remembered. The line continues not through blood, but through spirit. Not through genetics, but through love. May all who read this remember, we are never alone, never truly lost, as long as we remember our connection to all living things. As Tommy closed the journal, a sound rose from outside, howling, not just from Hope or the other dogs at the Academy, but from the mountains beyond, from the wild wolves and coyotes, from every dog in the valley. It was a song of connection, of recognition, of the eternal bond between human and animal. Tommy smiled, remembering that long ago morning when he first heard Max's call for help. He had thought he was saving a dog, but in truth, the dog had saved him, had given him purpose, direction, and a gift that had touched countless lives. The bridge stands strong, he whispered, and Hope barked her agreement. In a small town 1,000 miles away, a young girl named Luna woke to the sound of scratching at her door. She opened it to find a muddy, exhausted border collie with intelligent eyes and a collar bearing a single word: destiny. The dog walked into her room and lay down at her feet, looking up at her with an expression that seemed to say, I've been looking for you. Luna knelt beside the dog, and the moment her hand touched its head, she felt it. The connection, the gift, the bridge opening before her. In her mind, she heard a voice, not in words but in feelings and images, telling her about a boy trapped in a storm drain 3 blocks away, about the limited time before the rain would flood it completely. Without hesitation, Luna grabbed her phone and called 911, giving them precise directions she couldn't possibly have known. As sirens wailed in the distance, she looked at the border collie, at Destiny, and understood that her life had just changed forever. The line continues, the network grows, the bridge between worlds stands strong, built not of steel and concrete, but of love, trust, and the eternal bond between human and animal. And somewhere, in the space between dream and waking, between earth and sky, all the dogs who have carried the gift gather on a bridge made of rainbow light, their tails wagging, their eyes bright, watching over the world they help to save, one rescue at a time. Max is there, young and strong again, standing beside Zeus, who plays with Scout and 100 others, all connected, all part of the great web of consciousness that binds all living things. They watch as new partnerships form, as children discover their gifts, as lives are saved and families reunited. The work is never done, but it is good work, holy work, the work of connection and compassion that defines the best of what humans can be when they remember their place in the family of all life. And on that bridge in the small town where it all began, on foggy mornings when the world is quiet and still, some say you can still hear it. The echo of a German shepherd's cry that started it all. Not a cry of sadness anymore, but of joy, of purpose fulfilled, of love that transcends death and species and all the artificial barriers humans create. The gift lives on, the bridge stands strong, and every child who has ever looked into an animal's eyes and felt that spark of recognition carries within them the potential to be the next link in an unbroken chain of connection that stretches back to the beginning of time and forward into a future where humans and animals work as one. This is the legacy of a 5-year-old boy named Tommy who stopped to help a crying dog on a bridge. This is the power of compassion in action. This is the proof that we are never alone. The line continues, and it always will, as long as there are hearts brave enough to listen, souls pure enough to trust, and bridges strong enough to span the gap between worlds. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe if this story touched your heart. Let us know in the comments if you've ever felt a special connection with an animal. You might be carrying the gift too. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that miracles happen every day, and that the bond between humans and animals is one of the most powerful forces for good in our world. Together, we can build bridges of understanding and compassion that will stand for generations to come.